This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Tina Dahili. Welcome to Beyond Today from BBC Radio 4, the space to ask one big question about one big story. Today, Dr. Evil. Why is consent not enough? Now, this wasn't a big story, so there's a chance you may have missed it. It's about a man who was sentenced last week in the first ever case of its kind. His name is Brendan McCarthy, but...
For the last 10 years, people have known me as Dr. Evil.
This is what he does.
Tongue splitting, ear pointing, horns, transdermal implants, scarification, branding.
He calls that body modification. But a judge ruled that it was grievous bodily harm, and he's now in prison after being sentenced to 40 months.
I've given my life to body modification and piercing. To have it come back and hit me like this, it's crushed me completely. I'm a shell of who I used to be.
Someone who's met Dr. Evil and has been following his case for the last 2 years is BBC journalist Ruth Evans, who we'll hear from. But first, we wanted to meet one of his customers, Wayne Fitzpatrick. I can see that you've got a lot of piercings.
Yeah.
You've had something done to your eye. I'm assuming that's not a contact
lens.
Oh, that's a contact
contact
lens.
lens.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's easy.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Easy body modification. Can you describe what you've had done?
It's mostly piercings, but had my tongue split as well. I've only had a few tattoos. Haven't had many tattoos. I did originally have about 71 piercings altogether.
71?
Yeah. I did actually take a few out recently. So I've got about 57 now.
Where?
Most
I can
of
see
my face.
I can see most of them on your face.
It is, yeah. It's pretty much mostly my face.
What made you want to split your tongue? Or get someone else to split your tongue? In fact, Dr. Evil split your tongue.
I was just fascinated with piercings and modifications for a long time anyway. Took me quite a long time to go and have it done. I just liked the idea of having it done, so I finally went for it. I had it done, so I was happy having it done as well, to be honest.
We are opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of I can't take pain, piercings, like the idea of being tattooed. My pain threshold is probably quite low, and I would pass out.
Mine is quite high.
Yeah, I mean, obviously. For me, I can't understand why you would want to, what you would get out of splitting your tongue.
It's been different, I think, to be honest.
Is it for the effect that you have on people, being and also doing what isn't considered normal?
Yeah, I don't think it is even for other people. I think it's just being comfortable being myself and just expressing myself differently to what other people normally do.
How did you first come across Dr. Evil?
It was actually a friend that done a lot of my piercings. She spoke about him, and also I got in touch, and she went to have it done. It did take me about a good 3 years to consider having it done.
No regrets?
No, not at all. No, none whatsoever.
The actual procedure, you say your pain threshold is high, but yeah. I don't know, on a scale of 1 to 10, pain-wise, because you didn't have an anaesthetic. No,
like I say, it wasn't as painful as I thought it was going to be, to be honest. It was healing, I think, was more painful.
And what do you make of what's happened, the fact that Dr. Evil, Brendan's in prison now?
I don't agree with it at all, to be honest. I think it's a bit over the top for what's happened, especially when people are given consent to do something, and then they're basically saying that he's mutilating people. I read something about saying that some of the people that have actually gave their consent to have it done apparently are mentally unstable, which I don't agree with at all, because I'm definitely not like that.
The first time I met him was back in the summer of 2017. And at that point, he still had his body modification emporium, which was on a really beautiful cobbled street in Wolverhampton. And you walk in and it's kind of, he's got like shrunken heads hanging and, really strange art all over the walls and, lots of creepy stuff. And he is actually a really kind of sweet looking guy. He's got short hair, but then he's got this facial tattoo that kind of covers his chin and goes right down the front of his neck. I think he's 50 now. Yeah, it was a fairly small shop, but he had this black leather tattoo chair and a trolley with all his surgical instruments laid out on. The time that I was there, he wasn't doing any body modifications anymore, obviously, because he'd been charged at that point.
Did you ever get a sense of why he did it, his motivation for body modification?
I think he's just really curious about this profession, and it's we've got to be clear, it is a really niche world that we're getting into. There's probably 200 body modification artists in the UK max, and then obviously lots more tattooists and piercers. And I think
but they're not medical professionals.
Oh no, absolutely.
How are you removing someone's ear when you're not medically trained? From a layperson's perspective. Yeah, well, I asked him about his training and he said, he's trained with other body modification practitioners. It's a case of kind of learning. It's like an art form that's grown up over time and people learn from each other, they share expertise. But yeah, there absolutely aren't any medical qualifications that would allow you to do this. Do they do these procedures under anaesthetic? No, they're done without anaesthetic. Because if he had been... Hang on. So if I came to Dr. Evil and said, please, can you remove my ear? Mm-hmm. All I'd need to do is sign a form and he'd do it without any form of anaesthetic. Well, no anaesthetic, absolutely not. And if he had used anaesthetic, I think he'd be in even more trouble because... you have to be a medical practitioner to use anaesthetics. There are things like ear pointing, where you have your ears made into kind of a pixie shape. Or there are things like, the more extreme things that we're talking about in this case, which were ear removal or nipple removal. So that gets you into a world of people called nullos, like NULLO, which is where people have had parts of their body removed. Why? Well, I've spoken to a guy who had his nipples removed, and the charges in Brendan McCarthy's case relate to him. He was one of the customers, although he was never named in the court documents. Now, he said that the reason lots of people might want their nipples removed is if they're having a chest piece done. They kind of want to have a blank canvas. Almost. You don't want a kind of a nipple getting in the way of you. Oh, God, do you know what? This is so hard for me to listen to. I should tell you that okay. I have I won't pass out. Okay. But I have a tendency, to just give you a bit of context, every time I've ever had a blood test, I've passed out. I'm very squeamish. Me too, actually. Really? Okay. Yeah. How have you worked on this for 2 years? Yeah, I'm a fainter as well. Oh, yeah. Okay, good. You're in good company. Okay, carry on. So... That's the motivation for perhaps wanting to get that body part removed. And people have all kinds of different reasons. In his case, Nick, the guy I spoke to, said that he'd had nipple piercings, very big, thick and heavy nipple piercings, and he'd built up a lot of scar tissue as a result. And he felt very self-conscious about his nipples, so he wanted them removed. And he says it's made him feel much better about his appearance. He's much happier as a result. And he also said that he'd tried to go through NHS channels to get this done, but it wasn't a procedure that medics were willing to do. So then he went down the body modification route. What are the issues, the legal issues around what he was doing? This is the first time that body modification has come before the courts. And in that sense, it was kind of, no one was really clear about the legalities of what these people were doing. I think because it's kind of grown up over a long time and no one's been prosecuted until now, people kind of thought, we're okay doing this, we'll just carry on. But this doesn't get away from the fact that we have laws around assault.
wounding, grievous bodily harm, which he has now been prosecuted for.
What happened in court?
Well, initially it started with pre-trial hearings. So he was planning to plead not guilty, and his lawyers were trying to defend the charges against him by arguing that his clients gave consent. And the prosecution didn't dispute this, so there's never been any question of that. They accepted that his customers consented to the procedures, the tongue split, ear removal and nipple removal. But the crux of the case was whether their consent provided a defence, so whether the courts should allow consent to be a defence. And the judge, Amjad Nawaz, decided no, consent was not a defence. But basically the courts have allowed in the past certain circumstances to be defined where consent provides a defence. So, for example, when a surgeon cuts into you with a scalpel as part of an operation, that's not assault. You've consented to that operation, which means that's legal. That's not an assault. Or if you enter a regulated boxing match, or if you have your ears pierced, or if you have a tattoo. So these are circumstances which have been defined in law as situations where your consent provides a defence. The person's not liable if you've given consent. There were a number of supporters who had visible body modifications who were there in court to support Brendan. There was one gentleman who had blacked out eyes. There were people with transdermal implants, which are these ones that kind of go under the skin and poke out like, horns or kind of patterns under the skin. And as they were coming through the security gates, you could see the security guards, their eyes wide, as they were searching these people. It still has a shock factor.
How long was he sentenced for?
So last week he was sentenced to 40 months in prison, with the expectation that he'll serve half of that. How
did he respond to the verdict?
Well,
were you there?
Yeah, I was there in court. I mean, he was taken away, and from the other side of court, behind this wooden panelled wall, I heard this cry. It was like a howl of an animal. I've never heard anything like it. Really chilling. And obviously there were lots of supporters of his in court. His fiancée and his family who were just completely distraught. It was quite a chilling reaction.
And why does this case matter?
It is becoming increasingly popular. And the prosecution said in court that a police officer had been to visit the man who had his ear removed in February this year. So this was after he'd pleaded guilty. And he said that if he knew what he knew now, he wouldn't have had his ear removed, which is a bit of a theme of this case. Brendan said he would not have done it if he'd known what he knew now. But the thing is, there was so much ambiguity at the time, as body modification had never come before the courts previously. That's kind of a theme of this case. This is the landmark case. This is the first time that anyone has ruled on it. And amongst the experts I've spoken to, the feeling is that as a result of this kind of clarification of the law, body modification is going to be driven underground.
I have considered the eyeball inking. I'm not entirely sure I'm definitely going to go for it yet, though. They syringe ink into the whites of the eyes.
Okay.
I don't think I'm...
Oh, so it looks like you've just got a black eye?
Yeah.
Is it all of your eyes
not
black?
all, it's just the white.
Oh, just the white?
The colour of the eye and everything like that's still the same. If I was to, then I'd probably think about going maybe somewhere else, maybe Uruguay or somewhere like that. I have seen a couple that have gone wrong. I've sort of researched it a little bit, and I've seen some go wrong, but you can have, that sort of thing happen with a lot of the different mods. Even with people that don't like it, it doesn't tend to bother me that much, to be honest. I think it's just a little bit sad that some people can be a little bit judgmental, like overly judgmental about stuff. I'm happy with myself, so it doesn't really bother me what people think.
Thanks to Wayne, who's given me some ideas for looks for presenting the 10 o'clock news this Sunday. Ruth Evans and 5 Live's Adrian Goldberg, who found this story. Thanks also to Lucy Hancock and Georgia Cohen, who worked on today's episode, and Nico Rolfast, who mixed it. Let us know what you thought. Use the hashtag BeyondToday. You can email us at beyond.today@bbc.co.uk. Thanks for listening.
Can I ask you a very naive question, but how does it work in an airport?
I had that actually when I went to Poland a couple of years ago.
Good question.
They have the scanners now, don't they? They have the all-round scanners now, so you just stand there and obviously it picks up. But funnily enough, it didn't actually pick up a lot of the metal anyway. I think it picked something up on my leg, and they had to go. They sent me through the machine twice, took me to the other side, and had the little wand thing, and it didn't pick none of my metal up on my face. It picked something up on my leg. I've got no metal implants or anything in my leg or anything, but it was apparently picked something up on my leg. So you've just done my face, and there's no beeping gone off at all or anything like that. So yeah.
You know the way late at night, in bed, in the dark, your tired mind can wander and strange thoughts float like balloons escaping into the sky. Well, Bunkbed is a podcast where Peter Curran and Patrick Marber find the nearest faraway place from the hurly-burly of daily life, where tired minds can wander. Why don't you come along and eavesdrop and see if you like it? You can subscribe to Bunkbed on BBC Sounds.